Hi everyone. I'm planning to tackle some serious topics today. And the question, or what I'm going to touch upon, is, can we be free from suffering? Or at least, can we alleviate our suffering so that we can travel lighter, less burdened? Is it possible? Another topic would be, what is actually the nature of suffering? Because suffering comes from different reasons. And as I'm going to explain soon, there is some type of self-created, unnecessary suffering, which is optional. And there is some type of real suffering, which is part of the being here embodied on this planet and having a body. And also another theme would be like, okay, so what kind of work is necessary to diminish suffering? And therefore improve a sense of well-being, sense of wholeness, sense of okayness, peace, joy, causeless peace, inner harmony, ourselves. So that's my plan. And actually it was all kind of triggered by, I made a video recently, which was actually taken out of a group meeting I was having. And actually I put just a small portion of it on YouTube, and somebody commented on that. So this is all very much in a response to that person's comment. And yeah, so in the previous video, there was a short video I put saying something along the lines that if you are meditating or if you are doing spiritual work in order to feel good, you are engaging in mindfulness practice or non-dual meditation or any kind of Tibetan practice in order to not feel bad and to feel better. I was saying that if you do that, then actually you are going to be stuck. And actually we are misusing the spiritual practice. So that's what I said. And it's not going to work, because then if we engage in we are feeling discomfort, we are feeling some type of emotion that's unpleasant, or sensation or contraction that we don't like. And now I'm using some technique coming from a spiritual tradition. I'm using it, but with the agenda to make this go away. That is problematic. And that is actually creating more resistance to that emotion. And so actual resistance is another form of suffering. So that's what I said there in this context. Yeah. Now, somebody sweetly commented and said, whoa, so I had it all wrong, the person said. So I really thought that if I do inner work, then it's going to get better. So, and the person asked me, is it not get better at all? Is the needle of happiness or suffering is not going to change? And so I could see that my previous video, could be misinterpreted. So I wanted to touch on that, and hopefully this person will see that. All right. Also, I want to say the context where I'm coming from. So I myself, on my life, I started being interested in spiritual teachings, consciousness teachings, fourth way, Gurdjieff work, Buddhism, Zen, non-duality, Qigong, Tai Chi, anyway, many teachings. I started early on when I was really like a teenager. And for me, it was spurred by some sense of mysterious seeking. I wasn't aware that I was suffering much. As a teenager, even if you had some suffering, you're not usually. It's a time of like enjoying life and the novelty for most people. I'm aware that if one has had severe trauma and lives in a really bad environment, one can have a lot of suffering already as a teenager. But for me, I started on this seeking spiritual path from this kind of mysterious intuition that there is something more than I can see. And actually, I was plagued by this existential question of realizing that we are going to die. And I didn't like that. my teenager consciousness didn't like that. And somehow I couldn't grok this, like, so I'm going to die and then I'm going to stop being. There's no more being. So that was gnawing on me, and I couldn't sleep. And somehow I happened to my mother was very much into spiritual teachings and kind of esoteric Christianity and Christianity mysticism, yoga, and I just happened to get a book from my mother there, and it was my first book from an Indian master, and somehow I devoured it and was like, whoa, yes, that's it. So somehow that ignited a fire of searching methods, teachings, and then I went on from there. So, you know, some people start like that on a spiritual path. There's this kind of innate, some kind of existential curiosity, an innate trying to find out the deeper meaning of life, or the what are we here for? Who am I? What's the point? Yeah. So some people start on the path like that. And what I mean on the path, I'm talking about the evolutionary path, the path that goes towards up the mountain, so to say, and on the top of the mountain, there is some kind of knowledge, like felt knowingness of answers to these questions, like, what am I really? What is God? What is the relation between myself and God and all that is, and what is my purpose here? And so, yeah, that's what I mean by the path. And there are many paths up the same mountain, and they can be very different, and very confusing. However, all sages and deep realized beings, whether they are Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, Zen, Tibetan, they are kind of, if one is really seeing and hearing what they are saying deeply, they are talking about the same vista. Yeah. However, the methods, the different hills, how we go about it is different. Yeah. So, however, other people, they actually they start on a spiritual path differently. They start because there is a lot of suffering. And usually this starts a little bit later, somehow in our 30s or 40s or 50s. There is this sense of like psychological suffering, depression, anxiety, meaninglessness, hopelessness, or one is kind of just been wounded by life, by people, and we have PTSD and stuff like that, or any other conditions that make it really what Eckhart Tolle will call a lot of pain body. So it is the pain, the suffering, the pain body that is driving us to heal, yeah, to find a way to feel better, yeah, to have a life, because like life like this, tortured by the mind and tortured by the feelings and the racing thoughts and the sensations and all that, it's torture. So we are trying to find a way out of suffering, you know. So these are the two ways people usually come on the spiritual path, and they are all valid. Yeah. So that's what I want to say. I myself, so I was on a spiritual path, more like a seeking path, seeking truth and, you know, awareness practices and all of that. And only later I became interested in healing and working with others. And of course, I had my own suffering that wasn't aware of. It was there all the time, but I wasn't aware of. But later, in my late 30s or so, 40s, started to be more apparent. So yeah, and then I got into psychotherapy, and I started to work with many people for lots of years, hundreds and hundreds of people. So I'm lucky and grateful that I've been had the chance to meet with many people who were totally real with me and vulnerable, which is rare in these days because we are guarded and fake, trying to look good and protect ourselves and keep it cool, keep it together. So, but I had the chance to have a deep slice of humanity into their hearts and soul. And so I could see some universality of that suffering and the type of suffering. And so I came to the realization that actually there are two distinct processes. There's the process of healing, and then there's the process of awakening. And they are overlapping to some degree. Let's say if somebody is interested in awakening or deep consciousness evolution, there needs to be healing done, very likely, unless we are very lucky and one of the very few individuals that have been raised in a very lovely, wholesome, natural environment, being raised by very conscious, wise mommy and daddy, who just being raised by conscious, very evolved individuals in a wholesome little place can actually diminish a lot the woundedness and the suffering that we have. So we start already from a place of more healthy, unwounded, inner authentic nature, so to say. And that is we have less pain body. So if we have less pain body, then somehow we can just go towards awakening if we have that bug of seeking. Actually, not many people have that bug of trying to find out the meaning of life and what I am and the meaning of all it is. And so, however, these are very few people like that. Very few people, I believe, especially in the West. So usually, even people that are interested in awakening, deeply interested in awakening, teachings like Buddhism, Zen, Dzogchen, Tibetan, non-duality, fourth way, various other things, we still have some healing to do. Yeah. So awakening, which is like a deep awakening, becoming from an acorn to an oak tree, we need to heal in order to really go deeper and expand sense of awareness. So this is one aspect. However, there is just the process of healing. Yeah, some of us, we are just having sense of suffering because of various reasons I'm going to explain, some type of woundedness and what Eckhart Tolle calls a pain body. We have a strong pain body, and we are just seeking to feel better, and we need to heal. And this is very legitimate, and that is possible. That's what I say to the person who asked me, is it not possible? So no matter what we do, it's going to be the same? No. One can actually, whether we are on an awakening path or whether we are on a healing path, it is very possible to feel better and actually to travel lighter. And it is very possible and very doable to diminish these tortured beliefs and like stuff in the body and in our relational things and in the world. And it is possible to gradually, both through healing work as well as awakening work, which at some point overlap, it is very possible to unburden oneself and to clear one's consciousness and one's mind and body and heart from torture. And it is possible to, and it's totally, I've seen it, and myself and many other people, to have gradual less fear, less hopelessness, less despair, to have a more sense of okayness, and this okayness can gradually become more more inner stability, more inner harmony, more inner freedom, more spontaneity, creativity, all the way to feeling much more love, joy, ecstasy. It's totally possible, and through earnest psycho-spiritual somatic work, one can feel so much better, so much better. Yeah, so I just want to say that straight off the bat. So one thing that I forgot to say is that I'm coming to you, and what I am also offering to the world, this is the circle of being, somatic shadow work. So this is a combination of 30 plus years of my own inner work. It's a combination of this kind of awakening teachings, like Fourth Way, Gurdjieff work, Buddhism, Advaita Vedanta, Tantra, and many others. So it's a combination of awakening, awareness, teaching work, as well as the healing work, as somatic psychotherapy, shamanic work, psychedelic work, psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, shadow work. So which are more connected to processing, to healing, to clearing our subconscious. Yeah. So I find that it was necessary for me, very much so, to have both, to travel these both paths of becoming more conscious, awakening in some degree, following certain spiritual maps, as well as traveling the path of facing my pain and unpacking and bringing awareness to the unseen, the unconscious, and yeah. So that's where I'm coming from, and I will touch a bit later. I find it is necessary, actually, and very necessary, if one really wants to heal more thoroughly, or if one wants to awaken more thoroughly, it is important these days to combine these awakening teachings, awareness-based teachings, with psychosomatic processing and awareness, or healing. Yeah. So, understanding the nature of suffering. So what creates suffering? Yeah, there are multiple levels, and many teachings, they different teachings, they say, hey, the root of suffering is this. The root of suffering is that the belief and the felt sense of our spirit being confused and contracted and being deluded, believing that this spirit, which is fully connected to source and to the divine, the spirit, consciousness, presence, believes intellectually and feels emotionally and feels in the gut that we are a separate, autonomous thing, as being a person, being a body, being a, yeah. So then, just for this thing, the consciousness that is universal consciousness, unlimited, expression of the divine, is forgot its nature, forgot itself, and is being programmed to feel and sense that I'm a independent, autonomous thing, separate from everything. I'm a separate thing, separate from other people, separate from the earth, separate from nature, separate from our commonly father, mother, endlessness, God. Yeah. Some people say that is the root of all suffering, and I fully agree with that. I fully agree with that. Yeah. Now people come to me with psychotherapy, have a session. I cannot tell them this. I mean, it's like they will be like, "Whoa, okay, dude, that's strange." So I will touch you on different levels. Yeah. So I truly know that that is a fact, and this is more like for people coming from the spiritual teachings, non-duality teachings. That's what we are taught. And so the remedy is to through a certain type of investigation or a certain type of practices, to become conscious enough to be able to investigate the fallaciousness of that hypothesis that we are a separate thing. And through some certain inner type of work and investigation, one will realize that actually there was no truth. And because if we think that we are a separate thing, then automatically we have fear and lack. Fear of dying, fear that non-existence, and something is missing. It's almost like the divine flow is choked. And so we have like very tight shoes, yeah? So that's some aspect of suffering. Now, coming to a more like psychological and just regular psychological talk, somatic psychotherapy and all of that, which is accessible to everyone, is that another form of suffering, which I believe we need to start with that. When people come to me, I don't find it's very useful to tell them that, hey, you know, you are suffering because your consciousness believes is confused and believes to be an autonomous, independent, separate thing. And you just need to realize that your true nature is God and all of that. It's not useful. It's not useful, I found. It's not useful to tell them that, at least the people come to me. However, what is more useful is to go into this type of, to help them identify some more like other type of suffering, which comes out of the initial suffering, but it's some more practical to tackle with. You can tackle it. You can do something about it. So this is connected to the being raised in a society where everybody, from a spiritual point of view, almost everybody, 99.9% of the population is unconscious and asleep below its God-given potential. And so we are, and the overall level of humanity is low from the point of view of consciousness. And the proof is what you are seeing on TV and what's happening. Wars everywhere, all the time. And economics, politics, medical system, what's happening, it's obvious. I don't need to convince you. So we can see what's happening on this planet, which is like what Ouspensky would say, it's a pain factory. It's a pain factory. And it's an indicator of a low level of humanity, yeah? So now, no matter how awesome our parents are, they are like that. And also some of us have parents that are even so wounded and so messed up that traumatized and unconscious and without tools and shut down. And so being raised, we come here as a divine essence and get this amazing biocomputer, this body. But being raised in such conditions, we right away, and the consciousness is totally open and gullible, totally open, gullible, and totally influenceable. You can see with the Hitler youth, you know, get these like sweet children, and they are totally brainwashed within a few years, and then just can kill and do whatever, disconnected from conscience, you know. So, or child soldiers or things like that, you know. So being raised and the so-called receiving the so-called education, which comes through imitation, through what our parents tell us, but also what our parents, how they are, we imitate them and subconsciously. And also the even in the West here, where it's more civilized and overall more safe, the education is not meant to, it doesn't educate our essence, it develops our personality, our false ego, basically. It's mental, disconnects us from nature and from ourselves. So already this starts to be some suffering. And now we are wounded in some way. There's some kind of woundedness. And here, like, you know, any trauma, what is it's called trauma, and trauma is not just like being, you know, going to war and being deeply hurt, or seeing my friends being bombed, blown to pieces. Or trauma is not, I mean, there's this big trauma, like, you know, being abused, physically abused, being sexually abused, being beaten, being raped, being in extreme poverty and neglect. This is extreme trauma. But trauma is more than that. There is also small trauma, which is kind of developmental trauma, which from one angle, it is even harder to heal. It is somehow, let's say, living for many years, although you may get food and you get stability and all of that, like being criticized or being put down, or witnessing our parents fighting a lot, or witnessing something happening, or being not seen. You know, the child, we really needs to be seen and felt by conscious adults. And the child consciousness, any kind of shock, unlovingness, exposed to intense stuff, you know, somebody, our parents could be addicts or traumatized or coming from the war, and they are shut down and unavailable. All of this, anyway, there are very many forms of wounding. So that actually what happens, this developmental trauma or event trauma is accumulated in the body, in the somatic body, in the energy body. And then the child makes a meaning out of it, makes a meaning out of that, you know, there's something wrong with me, there is something that I'm not good enough, I am evil, I hate myself, I am not safe, I can't trust anybody, I have to be strong, there's something, I'm rotten. Anyway, we develop this deficiency identity, you know, some core limiting beliefs. So people come to me as a psychotherapy, they all have something like this. Everybody, every single one of you, and including myself, had some version of that, which is some interpreting, the child in us interpreting reality, interpreting what happened and making it about us. That what happened out there, and because daddy left, or daddy shouting, or mommy this, or whatever, being abandoned, or being an orphanage, or it creates the meaning of there's something wrong with me in some way, or there's something wrong with the world, or there's something wrong, there's something that not right, yeah, as a meaning. However, this underneath that, it's not just a belief, there's a deep emotional pain and somatic pain, yeah. So this creates a lot of suffering, basically. This is a big area of suffering, because as long as we subconsciously have this going on in the mind and the body, then this is going to sabotage our relationship, sabotage our endeavors, sabotage ourselves, and it's going to keep compounding. Yeah. So this is another form of suffering. Another form of suffering, which is very much connected with what I said just before, is this, what is called the fact that we, in order to be safe and to get love or approval, which as a child, we are totally dependent on it to be safe, to get love and approval. We learn that we can't be ourselves. We can't be ourselves. And so we develop these strategic adaptations in order to have less shit and to get more love. So we become in a certain way inauthentic. It's unavoidable. Where we learn that there is, it's not okay to be loud. It's not okay to have to be full of joy. It's not okay to experience anger or to express it. It's not okay to experience sadness or to show my sadness. It's not okay to be afraid or to show my fear. It's not okay to be open to love, to let someone in, because I will be hurt and I will lose it, or I'll be hurt. So it's not okay to anyway. So this is called inauthenticity, but it's more than that. It's some kind of emotional repression. It's we are repressing ourselves unconsciously, innocently, in order to adapt to this world. So, and this is deep. This happens early on. God, early on. Also, this is a big suffering. And this is not so easy to undo this. It's not possible to undo this with some kind of new agey workshop where we are dancing naked or we are whatever, having some intimacy thing. I mean, that's nice, man. I like to dance and to be free and laugh and spontaneous. That is definitely a good step in the right direction. But there is much more to undoing this emotional repression, this sense of not subconsciously not being able to be real, to be ourselves in some fashion. Everybody has that. And this is painful. This leads to all kind of other embroidery in the mind, and it creates a lot of problems in every way. And if it is severe, it creates actually strong bodily contractions, chronic pain, and all kind of our God-given emotional body has been choked and stifled. And this creates actually a lot of mental health diseases, disorders, which I don't really believe in these labels, but creates issues in relationship, creates a deep sense of self-disconnection and confusion and loss. It creates actually not being in touch with our inner compass. I mean, let alone that our inner compass and conscience is kind of asleep because humanity is asleep. And so for that, emotional repression, also it can create also serious when these emotions are suppressed and repressed. And there's a difference between them. Suppressed is that I'm feeling a certain emotion, I'm feeling sad, but I'm managing it so not to look weak or not to be punished. Or I'm feeling anger, but I'm containing it to not be fired, or to, for whatever reason, to it's not safe to do that because then I'll be in more trouble, whatever. So this is called suppression. I'm somehow aware of it. I'm aware of what's happening, and I'm just somehow suppressing it for some reason. And repression is even worse, is that this thing, I already started doing this early on and it doesn't even come up. Basically, anger should come, but it doesn't even come. It's squelched from the beginning, yeah? So people, yeah, so it's a lot of ideas here I'm trying to put together. Right. As these are, especially the strong repression, creates this kind of various false identities, actually, of I have to be nice, being a people pleaser, cannot put boundaries. I'm upset for people to be upset with me and afraid to be real, cannot say no. And also, as this continues, then these emotions, our anger, our all the emotions, they are not bad. They need to go somewhere. So they are not allowed consciously. They are going into the body and they become more like tight, frozen, and then later can become a source of disease, big disease, and shortening our life severely, or create a certain discomfort and like unpleasantness to the point that we are searching for alleviation through compulsions, addictions, and this or that. If Scott Killaby and Killaby Inquiries it's a great resource for undoing repression and suppression. Some other form of suffering is what they call in fourth way inner considering. But to just keep it simple, is this being very worried about how we are perceived and what will people think of me, and trying people to like me, trying to people not to judge me. And this is very deeply embedded in our system, and subconsciously trying to be liked and not to be disliked, and this again chokes our essence, our authentic expression. That's a big suffering. Now, compounded is that on top of all of this, which is wounding, trauma, and all of that, there's like just ignorance in our culture, and we are receiving these instructions to what does it mean to be successful, or what does it mean to we get these recipes for happiness, whether it's consciously or just subliminally or through osmosis. We get these recipes we are seeking happiness through out there, through a relationship, find a partner that's going to make it all good, or success, financial success, fame, getting objects, getting toys, boats, yachts, houses. So we are encouraged to seek happiness outside of ourselves, and we work hard to try to get that. And we try and we get this money, we get this car, we get this woman, or we seek it into substances, or but that in itself is suffering, because that is going to always be frustrated. It's not going to work like that. It's not going to work. And you probably noticed that you thought you wanted all these things and you got all those things, but you are not, somehow there's a sense of something is missing, something lacking, something is not quite right. So then we seek the next thing, and we seek the next thing. Actually, that seeking comes from this disconnection from our deeper sense of self. And we are disconnected from our deeper sense of self because we are pulsating at a low level of consciousness. We are asleep. And there's all these programs. We've been programmed with shit, with illusions and falseness. So there's this chasing of wholeness out there. Actually, usually people, they get to spiritual path because they get to be 40 or 50 or 60, and they actually attain those, they get the fame, they get the woman, they get the money, they get the car, they get the house, they get the stability, and there's still sense of lack and sense of emptiness. So then if they are lucky or they're earnest and they find some higher teaching, they will realize, oh, wow, actually they become disillusioned with what this world has to offer. And then we started to look inside, starts to go the journey inward, because there is the well-being, the inner harmony through deep spiritual consciousness work, as well as we need to clear those woundedness, trauma, all of that. Now, a lot of these things that I mentioned, these deficiency stories, core limiting beliefs, intense trauma that happened, this repression, not being able to be myself, being fake subconsciously, going against myself, all of these are psychological patterns, emotional, you know, they can be washed out. It's like a cloth that's been dirty and they can be totally cleaned. So with a good psychotherapist, like wise psychotherapist, just doing good healing work, awareness-based somatic work, Hakomi, killer inquiries, or through some skillful shamanic work, psychedelic work, but be careful with that, who you trust, your body and your mind and your soul. All kind of modalities. You know, there are many modalities out there that one can, if one is focused and does a few months or a few years, maybe a few years of good work, that can diminish a lot. So then all of this the pain body and trauma and deficiency story, this creates a lot of racing thoughts and like relational issues. So that can diminish a lot even through healing work. Yeah. So that's totally possible. Yeah. So instead of, it's more like diminishing this sense of the ego, the false sense of myself with which I identified, even if we are not seeking enlightenment or reach the truth of God, one can get to a point that this diminishes a lot, the pain body, and then we are more real, we are more wholesome, we have ability to love, we have ability to put boundaries, to say no, to get a sense of what I really like to do. So we are coming back more to nature, coming back to, in the fourth way, coming back to essence, and essence is much more happy. So we can have more and more happiness and things like that. Now, there are some, okay, I think I need to make another video here because it's getting late and I need to go to group. So stay tuned. I will continue with part 2 of this, which will be going deeper into exploring actually some traps on a healing path and some traps connected to this washed down a new agey, this new agey period where there's like all of these high teachings, they are mixed with ignorance and toxic positivity and illusions and bullshit. So some truth infused with bullshit, it creates something that is not so good, doesn't smell good, you know? So I will talk about some traps when you are going on the healing path, what to look after. Also, I will talk about this. Ultimately, there are 2 types of suffering. Avoid basically unnecessary self-created suffering, which can be totally dismantled. And then there is a real unavoidable suffering, as Buddha would say, connected to sickness, old age, death, loss, just hardship in life. You know, I think those people in Ukraine or those people in Africa, it's hard. It's hard. So there's not here kingdom of heaven. However, that real suffering, actually, it's not a mistake. There is some benefit to that. There's huge benefit. And if for people who are on a spiritual path, awakening path, it's very important to learn to have a right approach to suffering. Yeah, so I will touch on that in the second part. And so stay tuned. Ciao. Any questions, comments? You can put them here. Ciao.